Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I am your host, Donnie D'Amato, and today we're going to be talking about, or really presenting, Don't Tell Typographers. So, a couple things before we get into that. The first thing I'm going to talk about is that we had two great interviews this week. The first interview was earlier on Tuesday with Carl Koch. Carl Koch. I got to remember the Oshkosh part. Carl Koch. We spoke a lot about vibe coding in that conversation. Really great conversation. Got some great insights that I actually took into my following conversation with Dan Schmitz, who was the creator of GitFig, and a lot of the insights that he has about creating that project and what his next steps are. Really great stuff. But yesterday, I was at the Design Engineering Meetup in New York City, and I had the opportunity to have a presentation, and honestly, it was kind of like all by myself, which was fun for me because I talk a lot and I have a lot of things going on. So I was able to tell people about Mise en Mode, the book that's coming out, and some news about that. The illustrations are pretty much done. I'm going to do a final review today after the show, and then basically get the final deliverables put together and start putting them in the book and start actually getting unblocked from the process. So really exciting stuff there. Next, I also talked about Wireframe, of course. So if you wanted to be on the show, to go onto the site and, of course, submit on the form to get scheduled to be on the show, just like Carl and Dan did. And then finally, I announced the new project. It's Undefined. Undefined will be the new event that I'll be hosting in New York City that I would like to make as a monthly event. Still working out the kinks, still working out the format. A lot of other things to really kind of work out in this whole thing, but I am dedicated to making it happen, and I'm very excited to put this thing together for the community. So those are the initial announcements, but then I got into the presentation that I will be doing for you today. So something a little new. We're going to just get into this, kind of presentation that I did last night. So last night, we'll just do a little bit of a setup here. Hopefully this works out. I think this will be okay. All right, so let's go to the presentation. It is called Don't Tell Typographers. I see this is not, let's see, can I make this smaller a little bit? Let's try. Let's make this a little smaller because I know it's cutting off a little bit. Actually, you know what? Screw it. Let's just do it live. Yeah, because I do crop the, hi everybody, I'm down here. I do crop the image for broadcast for when I'm looking at browsers and, other websites and stuff like that, just to get rid of the browser bar and things. I don't think you're going to miss too much on the edges over there. And if you do, I'll be able to kind of fill in the blanks. But one of these days, I'll make this a little bit better. But the presentation that I did last night was Don't Tell Typographers. And let's see here. Yep, you already know who I am. I'm Donnie D'Amato. You should know that by now if you've been watching this thing. But if you didn't, hi. It's good to see you. I'm a design systems architect. I used to be design systems addict or an antagonist. That was actually on Twitter. I was a design systems antagonist. But I title myself an architect now. So we're going to be talking about math. And this is where we're going to draw the line, figuratively and literally, because what we do in typography in CSS will be a lot about drawing lines. So first, to kind of get into this, we're going to talk about Typography 101. So we're going to go through each one of these things in the presentation, but the first thing here says that letter spacing should be related to font size, so that's the space in between the letters should be related to the font size. So we'll get into the details about that in a minute, but the next one says line height should be related to font size. The line height should be related to line length, which is actually interesting for me. It was like a very new thing that I learned. And then body copy should be a maximum of 40 to 80 characters. Okay, so that's Typography 101 for folks who need to know about Typography 101. But let's go to these things. The first thing is letter spacing should be related to font size. So what does that mean? Well, that means that a size of Roboto of 50 point or 50 pixels, whatever you want to call it, has a particular letter spacing that is already embedded into the font, right? So you have those letters that are spaced out based on the way that the font measures were working. If you increase the size of that font, you'll get a letter spacing that's related to that font size already because it scales up. But you might find that the letters are too spaced out because the font is too big. So for Roboto 150 here, there's a much larger amount of space. But if I use the exact same amount of space between Roboto 50 and Roboto 150, which is what's on the bottom there, it looks too tight. So you have this like Goldilocks, not too much, not too little, just right amount of space that I might want for my font size. And just to be clear, all the font sizes on the right-hand side, they're all 150. So it might look like the font sizes are small, and it's really just a letter spacing in between. So clearly, there's some relationship here between the font size and the letter spacing that we want to maintain. So basically, the way that we kind of start thinking about doing this is by saying, okay, the body text size has one letter spacing value, and the heading text size, would be the larger size, is going to have another smaller letter spacing value, right? So we're going to have four values here, admittedly. There's going to be a body font size, body letter spacing size, heading font size, and a heading letter spacing size. We have four of those values that we'll need, and we want a linear progression between those values because we're going to have sizes in between that where we want that to match up accordingly. So when we're talking about that, this rate of change, right, it's going to be the delta space over the delta size. So again, the change, that's that triangle means delta. The change is effectively how the space changes, the letter spacing changes, over how the font size changes. And that's going to give us the rate of change. And there's a formula that we could work with this, but before we do the formula, this is the graph, and at the actual presentation I was pointing to the screen, but I'm not doing that here. But just imagine that at something like a 12 point, there would be some Y value that represents the letter spacing. And then at 60 point, which is much larger, we want a smaller letter spacing, so we would be going down further on the Y-axis to make a point down there. So there would be some, higher point for the smaller font size and a lower point for the larger font size, right? And this is kind of talking about the equation of a line. So we're thinking about the kind of y equals mx plus b, which we're going to show in a minute, but we need the m first, so that's that slope. So it's that slope between those 2 points. So we know all four of these values, actually. We talked about this. We had the body font size, the body letter spacing, the heading font size, and the header lettering spacing. So y, as we saw in the kind of the graph over there, that's the letter spacing values. So I take the two letter spacing values that I know, and I subtract them. And then I have the two font sizes that I know and subtract them, and then I do a division. And that's how I get m. So that's effectively what we're talking about here. We're going to be creating the letter spacing out of this formula, the y equals mx plus b, or the letter spacing equals the rate of change, which is m, times the font size plus b. Well, what the hell is b? Well, for us to just figure out b really quick, we could just move some of these variables around to figure out a b. So we could plug in a y, the m that we already figured out, and an x that's associated with that y to figure out what b is. And here's a table of stuff, and this comes from Matthew Badamo, I believe his last name is pronounced. He used to work at Adobe when he shared this on LinkedIn, but now works at Photo Room. And he had this whole table about this approach where he wanted dynamic letter spacing for as a font size increases for the letter spacing to decrease. So this is a chart that kind of outlines all this stuff. You don't necessarily need to read the chart, but you might not even need this chart necessarily, because again, if you have a body size and a body letter spacing and a heading font size and header lettering spacing, you could use just those four values. But I picked two of the values out of this chart just to go ahead and get it aligned, and made this formula. So this is just CSS. Don't let anyone tell you that CSS is not a programming language, because, oh my God, look at this. This is absolutely programming right here, right? So we have the M variable being calculated right there. I basically, again, took two of the values that were out of that chart from Matthews, to talk about the size basically and the letter spacing. So I'm getting the 2 letter spacing values at the top, dividing that by the 2 font sizes, and then that makes my M. In the B, I'm basically taking a font size and a letter spacing and plugging that in to get a B. And then the following one there, I'm getting that Y for the Y equals MX plus B, right? So I'm doing all that there. And then finally, I apply that value to the letter spacing, making sure that the minimum is 0 EM, right? Now, if you put 0 in letter spacing, you might believe that, oh, does that mean that the letters are now on top of each other and now negative is going to put it on, closer? That's not the case, because in CSS, and I know you can't read this, but letter spacing basically says that the letter spacing value that you provide is additive, meaning that if you say letter spacing 0, then that is in addition to the existing letter spacing that is on the font. So that means if I want to make it tighter, I can make a negative value, which is what we're doing here. How to choose the values. Again, this is not a great presentation for what we have on the screen here, but I'll just send you through this stuff. Basically, you want to choose your metrics for your font, right? So if your heading body copy font size, your body copy font size, your body copy letter spacing, your heading font size, and your heading letter spacing. You want those 4 values, which you should probably have already in your systems, about pretty kind of bare minimum stuff. And then once you choose those things, you kind of already have your X's and your Y's for this formula to start plugging into different places to output that letter spacing value. And of course, you could just use the formula that I provided over here to get this dynamic letter spacing with your own font sizes and letter spacing, however you like. There's one thing that I want to talk about, though, is that there's a gotcha. And if you've seen a little bit, or you're paying attention to some of these formulas that you will see and will have seen already, the question is basically, what should this resolve to, right? So what we have here is a calc that's dividing 16 pixels by 1 rem. Now, most people recognize 1 rem to normally equal 16 pixels. That's not always the case, but generally when we internalize what we think 1 rem is, it's usually 16 pixels. So that means that this should be 16 pixels divided by 16 pixels, which your mind believes, oh, that sounds like 1, because if you divide anything by itself, it equals 1. Well, that's the case for every browser except for Firefox. So if you want to divide by length and dimensions and things like that, you can do that in most browsers except for Firefox and then a couple of other ones that are shown on here. But some of these formulas, if you're using Firefox, it won't work as you expected. You would actually need to change the values in the denominator to something that's a whole number without any units, and then it would work. So that's actually what I've done in my system in a couple of places where I do things like this, where I convert everything into whole numbers that can be then used in terms of that that unit in the calc. But other browsers, you could just go ahead and put the values in, which is super helpful. Keeps the things actually a lot more clean or understandable, because you'll have these values that you're like can tell what they are. When you convert them into terms of something else, it's a lot more challenging to follow what's happening. But again, I don't actually do this in any of my stuff because I think it's a little bit overkill. But if you want to have dynamic letter spacing based on font size, something that you can give a shot. The next thing, line height should be related to font size. Okay, so similar kind of situation here. Here's a couple of different examples. Again, Roboto 50 point on the left-hand side. You have a letter spacing that's there. On the right-hand side, it's 150 point. But doing nothing to the letter spacing makes it much larger. You get that blue line there. If I use the exact same letter spacing that's over there on Roboto 150, you could argue that maybe that's okay, or maybe you want a little bit more, a little bit less, right? But you could definitely dial it in a very similar way to how we did letter spacing, which is exactly what you would do, right? Again, you would have those 4 values, the font size and the line height for your body and your heading, and you plug that into this formula, and you would be able to output a line height on this linear progression, right? So you can have basically the same thing happen here, which could be helpful. Now, something that a lot of designers have wanted for a really long time is to align stuff to the grid. And most of the time when a designer would try to hand that off to an engineer, the engineer would go ahead and give him the finger because it was too hard to maintain, to try to get line height aligned to the grid, because you have lots of different font sizes, and then designers would make up font sizes on the fly. Then we'd have to figure out what the heck that font size, line height was supposed to be based on that font size, right? So it was just really hard to maintain, and we would just say, it's not worth it to try to align everything to the grid. So we would usually just skip it. Well, we could do that now. You can use the new round function in CSS to take a line height and then round it to the nearest grid unit. So that's what this looks like here. Basically, you do line height, you say round, you go up, so all the values go up, so it makes sure that it's not like, the font will actually sit in the line. Then you put in your line height that you want. You could use the calculation that we put together earlier. And then you say what the grid unit is, right? So you're basically the units in which you're rounding to, because you could actually, instead of rounding to like 0 or 1, you could round to 0 or 8, basically, is what's going on in here, which is really helpful. This is actually easier to do in CSS now than it is to do in JavaScript because of this function. It's actually really interesting. The thing is and this is the gotcha, is that a small font size change could produce a large gap between lines. So what does that mean? Basically, if you have a line height, a font size that produces a line height that ends up kind of like in between things. Oh, the new school is calling me. I'm gonna let that go to voicemail. You got to do it live, folks. So if you have a line height that's between two lines, basically what ends up happening sometimes is that line height will skip to the next grid unit. So you'll get a really large line height where you might not have been expecting it. So that's just by font size, right? And especially if you have a dynamic font size, maybe something that's doing like viewport units or something like that, you can accidentally have a big jump in line height that you weren't expecting. So something to be really careful about. Maybe it would be better to do like a smaller grid unit, so maybe like a 4. That would be okay. But those larger grid units like 8 or maybe something larger, you're going to get these really big jumps. So be careful about that. Again, I don't really recommend it, and we've more or less kind of avoided it in a lot of design practices at this point. Okay. Line height should be related to line length. This is something that I was like, hold on a second, really? And I found out, yes, it's true. A couple of different places, Pimp My Type says this, Typographic Web Design, Google Fonts Knowledge, Typographic Design Patterns and Best Practices all have references to the fact that a line height should be related to the line length, or the measure. It's the amount of characters in a particular body copy, right? So that was when we were talking about earlier, where you should have 40 to 80 characters in a line, right? That's the optimal length for readability. So I was shooketh when I saw this. I was like, wait a minute, I've never done this before, right? I've never had anyone tell me or even considered that the line height should be related to this. I've always put in like 1.5 and moved on. So how will we do this? Well, is it container queries, right? Is that how we're going to go ahead and figure out whatever the width is? Well, the problem with that is that container queries tell you at this width, do this, right? So in order for us to try to relate the width of the container to figure out how many characters there are, we would have to have like a breakpoint for every width of the container to figure out what the actual characters are in there. It's just a little backwards for what we really want. Could we use container query units? Well, not exactly, but that's a percentage of the container. Again, it doesn't tell you how big the container is in terms of pixels or characters or anything like that. It just tells you a percentage. So again, that's not really going to help us out. What we really need is we need the width of the container, not a specific point, not a percentage. We need the actual width. So how the hell are you supposed to do that in just CSS, right? Well, we can actually do that apparently. So there's a post, I think this is on Front End Masters, about how to get the width of and height of any element in only CSS. And I'll let you know right now, I barely understand what's happening in here because it is very tricky, but we're going to try to go over a couple of the pieces. So the first thing, which you, again, can't really see very well, but what we're doing here is we're assigning a couple of different CSS properties. There is kind of like this private property called _x that we're assigning to 0. There's a property called ch that's going to represent a character size. and that's being set to 0 as well, but as an integer, so it can't be any float numbers. And then the final thing you can't see because I'm covering it right now with my face, is that there's a keyframe that's called X that is going to be animating that underscore X from 0 to 1. That's what's going on underneath me. Here comes the rough stuff, which again, I'm covering a whole bunch, unfortunately, but effectively what we're doing is we're going to animate that keyframe linearly, and then also assign a timeline to that keyframe with this -cx variable. That's being used as a view timeline underneath me over there. And as I understand it, basically what's happening is as that before element is changing in terms of its the way that it takes up space inside of the element, that's affecting the view timeline, and that's effectively giving us the ability to calculate the CH that's all the way up on top there, and that CH is outputting the number of characters that is actually in the line. So in the next slide here, I actually have a demo that I'm going to show you. Let's go to another tab here. Come here. All right. So here we go. So now, as you can see here, or maybe can I make this a little bit bigger so you can actually see? Yeah. So now, as I increase and decrease the width of the page here, you could see that the CH number that I have at the end here is actually changing, because it's saying basically how many characters there are on in this block. Okay, as it changes, and there's no JavaScript. You can see there's absolutely no JavaScript. I'm not importing anything, nothing up my sleeve. This is all just the CSS that's sitting in here. And if you pay attention very closely, as I go underneath 60 characters, you'll see the line height change. So I'm going to go nice and slow, right about here. There you go. You see it? It's actually getting tighter right there. You see that? And now I can make it a little bit looser. Okay, and this calculation again is being done completely with CSS, right? So that's some cool stuff. Let's go back over here. Here we go. All right. Bonus. This is something that we do that all the typography stuff that I've shown you so far is actually really related to print that we brought into the web. But this thing is specifically Web Typography 101, where heading side should decrease on smaller devices, right? Because we don't have enough room. So why do we do that? Why do we decrease the heading font size on smaller devices, right? And I asked this last night, and I had a couple of interesting answers, but one of those answers was, because we need to, or accessibility, or something like that. And yeah, good answers, but not the answers that I personally was looking for. And I'll explain a little bit about, my direction in a minute. But the thing that I caution people is that I don't want people to answer this with the answer, oh, until it looks good, right? It looks better when it's this. That's not the right answer, because you can't repeat that, right? That's not a systematic thing. It's very subjective. If I ask somebody else, does this look good? They'll be like, maybe not. I got to change this. So you want something that's systematic that you can repeat, so that it's not related to some other person that is like the all keeper of what this thing is supposed to look like and how it's supposed to behave. You want something systematic about it. So to figure this out, I want to go back to the Typography 101, because there's this body copy should be a maximum of 40 to 80 characters. And again, we're not talking about a body right now. We're talking about headlines, but I think they're related. So looking at that, we have these two examples here, where on the left, I have a headline and some body copy, and we have roughly 60 characters to that body copy, which is kind of like what the optimal kind of reading measure should be, between the 40 and 80, right? So I kind of like just pick 60 there, or whatever fits in the mobile space, right? Because we're going to go ahead and have that text wrap and go around to different lines, right? So that's going to go ahead and feel it a lot better. Yes, thank you. I know about the text being cut off, Joe. Thank you very much for the comment. I mentioned it earlier. So that's what's happening in there. Is we're gonna get either the 60 characters is gonna be good, right, in terms of like a kind of a max, and then you're gonna have the characters only fitting in that space, right? So that's those two kind of I guess thresholds that we'll talk about, right? So my hypothesis here is that the heading font lockup should be harmonious with the body copy. So what do I mean by that? Well, going back to this example here, I want that heading to align to the body copy that's there, right? So I want those two things to actually kind of fit together. When I'm curating this, I'm thinking about those two things sitting together. Usually headings and body, they're not separate from each other. Usually you're going to go ahead and introduce the topic with the headline and then bring in the body to get more detail. So those two things are with each other very often. So I want that thing to be locked up similarly for as long as possible until it doesn't make sense any longer, really. So with that in mind, and again, I'm getting cut off here, but we're gonna work with it. The heading maximum width should be a roughly 60 body copy characters. Again, looking at that lockup, I want the heading to match the body, so that means that I want my heading width to be a maximum of what effectively the body copy's width is. And if the body copy's width is 60 characters, I want the headings copy to be 60 body copy. Oh my God, it's really hard to explain this. I want the body copy has 60 characters long. We know that, right? I want that to match with the heading, but I can't use 60 heading characters because that's going to be much larger. Those characters are much bigger typically. So I need to use the body copy's characters width to determine the width of the headings maximum. So that's why I use 60 RCH, which is root character size. It's kind of the same thing as an M, just talking about the character width for the heading, because that's related to my body size. So my body size is going to be 60 RCH, and I'm going to be able to use the same value for the heading size, 60 RCH, and make them match. Then I want my heading minimum width to be 320 pixels. The reason I'm choosing that value is that that's generally the smallest device size width that we see. We see that kind of thing in DevTools. We've seen that in other accessibility documentation about the smallest available width that we need to be working with. 320 is usually that magic number that we work with. The heading scale should scale down proportionally between these sizes, okay? The heading largest size should be something called desktop, and then your smallest heading size needs to be maintain a visual hierarchy with the body copy, meaning you do not want your heading to be smaller or even the same size as your body, right? You want a heading size to be slightly larger than your body, just to maintain that visual hierarchy, right? So that means we have 4 values, right? We have the heading maximum width, we have the heading minimum width, we have the heading largest font size, and we have the heading smallest font size. We have those 4 values. You know what we're doing next. We're going to go ahead and put them into a formula. But first, we're going to do a couple of things to just set things up. So what we have here is heading largest. So the largest heading we have in this example is 2.5 rem. The heading smallest, the smallest this heading was going to go is 1.2 rem. We're going to put both of those things into a clamp function, right? So it's going to be the smallest and the largest value to put in the clamp. In the middle, this is going to be the way that these values go between the smallest and the largest. And we're going to figure that out with this equation again, right? So the equation of a line, we're going to subtract the 2 y values, which in this particular case are going to be the heading font sizes. We're going to subtract those 2 values because we're trying to figure out what the font size is supposed to be. And then the 2 x values are the 2 widths, right? The maximum and the minimum width. So we're going to plug all that stuff in. And again, in Firefox, that division is not going to work. But we're going to plug all those values in and figure out M. But we're not going to figure out the plus B part. In fact, we're going to do something a little bit different because what we're going to do, and you kind of can't see it here, unfortunately, but you're going to take the M value and you're going to times it. Actually, I'm going to remove myself for a second. You could times it by the 100 VW. And the reason why I recommend this is so that all the headings will scale at the same rate. Because if they scale at different rates, then the hierarchy might be confusing between different sections of the page. So that's why I recommend that if you're going to scale fonts uniformly in this way, you use viewport as opposed to container. That's what I recommend. So what does this look like? It looks like this. So as you can see, as I'm going down, you can see that wrapping, the lockup, is actually maintained until I get to that final smallest 320 width, and then the text will start wrapping again. So you can see at the longest here, it's really far out. Then it's wrapped to 2 lines, and it stays at 2 lines until here, where it finally is at that smallest value, goes to 3 lines, 4 lines, So it's maintained. That lockup, the way that the text is wrapping in the headline, is basically scaling almost like if you're using transform scale in CSS, right? It basically kind of looks like that as it's going down. And again, keeping that lockup maintained as it's going transitioning between the maximum and minimum, I think is a much more systematic way of approaching how you scale this headline text down from a max and a min. All right. Um, but ultimately, to do thoughtful typography on the web, you need math, right? That's what we kind of basically figured out in this whole thing. Again, I don't really recommend this stuff because it is wildly complex for a lot of people, hard to maintain if you don't know what's going on. Really, what do I recommend? I recommend stuff like this. And I'm going to put my head away for a second. Basically, to put a line height of 1.5 for your body, that's generally going to be okay depending on the font. And then for heading sizes, a line height of about 1.15, somewhere between 1.1 and 1.2. And then I wouldn't recommend this for all of your headings to be the same font size, absolutely not. But just for this example, making a font size using fluid.style. And fluid.style has a calculator to include your viewport units along with a rem, and that's going to make things a little bit more accessible in this particular case. And then there's even an article that explains why that's important that goes along with that stuff. So there you go. Thank you very much. That will do for the for the presentation. I hope that was informative in some way. Again, thanks, Joe, for commenting about the stuff being cut off. I know, I know. I need to figure out a good way of transitioning between cutting off and showing you the whole screen at some points. But anyway, hopefully that was cool for you folks. So let's. I know this is about a half hour here that we knocked out. Let's also do a quick mini game challenge thing because I haven't done that in a while. Let's see what comes up for us here. Here we go. All right. So we're doing a wireframe challenge. Basically, is giving a prompt, some kind of design prompt that I need to consider. And the prompt today, or at least for this first round of the game, is make paper clips for a pizza shop in Kenya. Oh, well, come on now. First off, I don't know anything about Kenya. I actually did remember studying Kenya back in like 3rd grade, but I remember practically nothing. But if we're talking about paper clips for a pizza shop, come on, right? You got to make the paper clips look like slices of pizza. I think that's got to be pretty simple, generally speaking, right? Because you just make a triangle shape, right? And you bend the wire in a triangle shape. Maybe you can even have little pepperoni slices on there. I think that would be really cool. I think this is an easy one, right? I think this is a wildly easy one. Let's. I don't know if there's anything unique about the pizza in Kenya necessarily. I know nothing about that, but that's exactly immediately what I would do. It's pretty on the nose. All right, let's see what else we got here. Make a subtle advertisement for a bookstore. A subtle advertisement for a bookstore. I don't know how to be subtle. I really don't know how to be subtle. I mean, what would is a subtle advertisement a good advertisement? I mean, maybe like something. Yeah, maybe a passive advertisement is a good idea. I guess if I'm making a subtle advertisement for a bookstore, how am I subtle about it? I guess I would have to meet people where people are reading books, right? Maybe it's like, I don't know, like plugging it in a library workshop, maybe? Maybe that's where you would do the advertisements, right? Because advertisements all about meeting your audience where they are, right? So if your audience, is readers or are readers that are supposed to be buying books and reading books, I would go where those readers are, right? And readers can go to the library because that's where the books are free, so that's good. But maybe they want to purchase a book and they don't know where. So yeah, maybe I would go to the library and kind of start networking over there and subtly drop hints that there's a bookstore that you could buy this book from. Or I'm kind of curious to know if you could like make bookmarks and then like put them in the books in the library. Is that kosher? I don't know. I don't know if that's kosher. because maybe maybe you find that you could, oh, this book is in this bookstore, as part of the bookmark, and then you get a bookmark too. Maybe that's, I don't know how kosher that is to just like leave stuff in books that are effectively ads. I don't know if that's kosher or not, but could be fun. All right, and let's do one more. Um, what is this? Wow. Okay, the prompt is make a panda puppet for a pet food subscription box. Okay. Oh my goodness. Well, first off, I don't have any pets, so I don't know much about that ecosystem. But I will say um, that I think that's a cute idea. I think that the idea is already immediately cute. Again, this is kind of like on the nose for me because it's kind of just telling you exactly what would be done. Uh, it's not really giving me a lot of I don't know, creative freedom necessarily because it's telling me exactly what I need to do. But I guess pet food subscription box. So yeah, if you have, I guess you could have a subscription to pet food. I mean, we have a subscription to human food actually here at Design Systems House. We order 4 meals for the week just because we work from home and it's easier instead of like going out and cooking and spending all that time doing that. It's actually a lot easier for us to handle. So pet subscription box makes sense. I get that part. I think it would be fun to have a puppet. I don't know if a panda is too on the nose, but I think yeah, some kind of hand puppet or maybe even like a stuffed animal, stuffed toy for the pet itself. I think is fun. Um, and sure, again, I don't think it's given me a lot of opportunities for me to like be creative here because I think it's really putting me on the nose. But that's all right. You know what? It was fun. We spent 5 minutes having a good time, right? I hope so. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap up the show for today. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you checking out the show for today. Before you go, please help out the show by hitting smashing the like and subscribe button. You got to smash it, otherwise it doesn't work. And just get notified when the next time we go live. And don't forget to join the official Design Systems House Discord by visiting discord.ds.house. We'd love to see you over there. And play nice in those comments, right? Just play nice. Play nice. I saw kind of a mean comment the other day. I was like, that's not nice. That's not nice. So play nice in the comments, why don't you? All right? And I'll see you on the internet. Bye.